Oh, snap. Hey, 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 ho, ho, ho. Wait a second. It's not Christmas anymore, but Santa can't be the only one with getting hoes. No. We won't have that in there. We won't have that in there. But seriously.
Okay, here, let me start it. Okay, it's season 6, episode 12.
Yes.
What up, what up? And welcome to season 6, episode 12 of Dualistic Unity with the lovely Miss Amanda here and myself, Jackie. Although the names really don't mean Jack. In reality, we're just different pieces of reality, having a conversation, making mouth sounds and vibrations at each other, passing through a computer and somehow making sense of it and and changing as a result. And now you are perceiving all of these waves in your ears and changing as a result too. Ripples upon ripples happening in real time.
We are clearly feeling silly. And it is after having another amazing conversation. I'm really excited for you guys to watch this episode. Jackie and I get into learning and research and the public education system and current systems and war and global problems and our contributions individually, collectively, our needs, our fears, our doubts, authority. Like, we get into quite a lot. And so I'm very excited to share this, and I hope that this just sparks so many more conversations. And I'm excited to hear what you guys think about us, our rambles. So enjoy.
Recording in progress. That's exactly what the AI thing sounds like. Anywho, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Dualistic Unity. I believe this is season 6, episode 12. 12?
Yes.
12.
Yes.
Season 6, episode 12. Andrew, you can cut that up and make it and pretend that I actually knew the first time. Or, Andrew most likely will not edit that and just leave it in, especially now that I said it. So, anywho, yeah, we just hopped on here a couple minutes ago and we got into a chat about research as a whole because me and Amanda are planning a research workshop, actually, because both of us are very passionate about, the process of research and the importance of information literacy and knowing which sources are, trustworthy and to what extent, and also maintaining the mentality of healthy skepticism and, gaining context, exploring and gaining context, and then coming to your own sort of conclusions because, one thing about research is that there are no final answers. Like there's no settling on certainties. Like science is best guesses at best, right? So yeah, so just overall all that stuff, we're going to be getting into it in the workshop. But yeah, it's been a good day so far for me. How are you doing, Amanda?
I am excited and curious. And so I love that you and I both have a love of learning. I think at the core of it, a really, really enthusiastic approach about our curiosity. And so I think that translated very well in our public education system and journey. And because we stayed connected to our love of learning, to our curious nature, we were able to learn how to research, and really researching is trusting your ability to think of maybe a question or something that you're curious about, and to explore that and to collect information, analyze it, and to find ways to use what you're learning to invent something, create a program, start a business, come up with an inspiration for a painting or a culinary dish. Like, learning and research are things that we use all the time. And I'm very excited that we are going to be able to host a workshop, and we're creating tons of resources. And, so that way, when you're done with the workshop, you're going to be able to, you know, have a list of commonly recognized research resources. Have something, a research, a dualistic unity like research guide, and so that's going to have like all of the general considerations to keep in mind when you're researching. Is this something that maybe has ethical considerations? When you're thinking about certain clinical trials and clinical studies, do people need to give consent? Or is there any information about sexual trauma and things like that? So there are lots of considerations to keep in mind when you're researching, and it's nice to have like a cheat sheet. But also in the workshop, we're going to be talking about those self-limiting beliefs. So many people that I talk to feel like they're not a good researcher, or they're not smart enough, or they're not capable enough, or they couldn't become a great researcher because, they struggled in the public education system. And it's like, your potential has nothing to do with your experience in the public education system. Your potential has nothing to do with your lack of exposure, or your lack of direct experience with learning and researching things as a whole. So I really am looking forward to, in our workshop, being able to just, give people space to see that they have the same potential as the two of us. And although we may sound super articulate one moment, I am stumped. I stump myself with certain questions, and I'm like, I just don't know where to go. I just don't know where I'm gonna, and then I'm, like we all hit intellectual walls. And just because you don't see Jackie and I in our particular instance, just because you don't see us struggling with certain questions we think about, doesn't mean that we don't. And so I really want to help people empower themselves, and to feel confident in their ability to learn anything about any topic. Like the potential is there. And so I'm so excited for us to host the workshop really soon.
Yeah, me too. I just think it's amazing how we have this resource of the internet. Like, that is, you have access to pretty much anything you could ever want to know. And, besides the things that we don't know, and we don't know that we don't know, right? Or we could never know because, in the case of consciousness and subjectivity, like, that's a really hard thing to look at directly. So, at least for me, that's something that I ponder a lot. That's like, I don't know, but there's a ton of research out there on that direct thing. And yeah, there's when you allow yourself to just follow your genuine interest, and you have the resources at your fingertips, and somewhat how to navigate them. We just want to give you like a little starter kit so that like the basics, and then you can go out there and research whatever your little heart desires. And you're not going to be graded, and you don't have to do anything with it. You can just go on and find out stuff about the world, about yourself, about the universe. And that, at least for me, has had such a enriching impact on my life, just like knowledge and the little things that you learn and pick up along the way are, I think that's one of the most amazing things about being a human, right? Like, we have the capacity for so much intellectualizing. And although the intellectualizing never really touches truth, because the description is not described, right? Anything we're trying to research is what it is, and the measurements that we're using to look at them aren't what they are, right? Isn't the variable that we're exactly looking at, or it's in a really controlled environment so that we can measure things that we can't normally measure in phenomena that are happening out here in the world. um but yeah, it's just fun. That at the end of the day, learning is just fun, and humans are innately curious, right? And so we might as well equip ourselves well, though, for the road, because there's a lot of there's a lot along with all of the information that we have access to. We have access to almost a lot more misinformation and unreliable sources and publications that are funded by, certain corporate interests or government interests and lobbyists. Like, sometimes you have to look at who's saying it and why they might be saying what they're saying. And so, yeah, as long as you can navigate that and discern, okay, I feel like this is a reputable study by somebody who, maintained that attitude of healthy scientific skepticism and tried to be as objective as possible. And yeah, I forgot where I was going with that. I read your little comment in the chat. Amanda dropped the definition for information literacy, which is the ability to locate, evaluate, and effectively use information from various sources. And that's a perfect description of what we're trying to promote, right? Like, if we have this new tool, we want to be able to use it effectively and not in a way that's destructive and divisive and, you know, just spreading misinformation for certain interests, for money, yeah, for gain in some sort of way. So yeah, we want to help you be able to navigate that. And we've been talking about the workshop for a minute now. So you can tell we're excited, but yeah, it's gonna be a great time. So if that sounds like of any interest to you, we will be doing that probably sometime in March, and exact dates to come. Otherwise, we will actually be starting a research segment where we research a topic beforehand, ideally topics suggested by the community,
Yes.
and then we talk about the process of researching it, what we found, what the current theories are about whatever it is we're researching, or different implications or considerations or perspectives, right? Because everything is sort of looked at from a specific lens in terms of research and science. Like, usually it's from, a psychological lens, or from an artistic lens, or from a scientific lens, or from a spiritual lens. And there's so much that you can dig into from all of those perspectives. So yeah, we'll be looking at different perspectives, considerations, integrating them, and having conversations about our thoughts on the topic. So yeah, we should be putting out something to request topics pretty soon here, but
Yeah.
just something to look forward to, something I'm really looking forward to, because I really haven't, I research every day. I was kind of saying before that, like, even when I just go on Google and I look up a random question, like, what is quantum entanglement? That's me doing research, right? Even if I'm just using Google, and sometimes I go on more sophisticated websites and journals and things, and like, but all of that falls under the umbrella of research, although I haven't gone like really deep into a subject in a minute. So I'm excited to have those things to dig into, without it being in the context of school. Probably the last time I did like a big research project, it was in college. And I like that you mentioned that we preserved our love of learning. I think recently my love of learning has recovered, but it's definitely gone through like some shit, and I'd like to thank the public education system for that. And how everything I learned that if you're researching something, learning was for an outcome, right? To get you somewhere, to get you something. And so that makes it so I have resistance to starting projects like that, or like reading books, or like thinking about like writing an essay or something, even stuff like that. I have resistance to it because it reminds me of school. And it's like, even though I want to be doing these things, it's like part of me is still resistant because of the shame that was like, or like the
Yeah.
constant shame, insecurity, like fear that's part of that system of constantly being judged and evaluated for your performance and like your ability to learn being judged. That's just so crazy to me looking back, but I think it's recovering, and now I'm those feelings might still be there, but it's not getting in my way as much, and I'm more excited about learning and just knowing that I have all of eternity to do whatever I want. So I can research as much or as little as I please about any topic that I wish, and it's not going to get me anywhere. So if it's interesting and I'm enjoying myself doing it, then carry on.
Mhm. Absolutely. There are, the spark of love of that learning has been reignited, and so it definitely took a beating. That love of learning, that curious nature took a beating in public education because it's very much one size fits all. Learning used to be so customized because you were either learning about a profession or a skill set from your parent at home, or you were able to apprentice under a renowned or a painter or a sculptor, and so you were in the environment. It was you and the teacher, the mentor, and maybe a few other students that got to have an apprenticeship as well. But for the most part, it was like no more than like maybe like three, maybe max, if you were at an apprenticeship back in the old days. And so you had this customized experience, and learning and creativity and curiosity, all of those things had space to move. All of those things had encouragement, and there was, it's just not, it just is unfortunately not like that. And you would hope that parents could maybe offer a little bit of customization when you get home, but the way that our system is currently set up, most parents are overworked and exhausted, so by the time that they come home, their battery is pretty low, reasonably so. And so it seems very difficult for them to now fill in the gaps of this public education system that is designed to just really encourage encourage you how to be a factory worker. When I learned about the history of public education and how the inspiration behind it was more so to teach you how to take orders, how to work in a factory setting, how to be a good worker, to be reliable, to be punctual, to have scheduled breaks, to have scheduled bathroom breaks, to be at a certain place at a certain set of time, to have certain expectations, to get tasks done, to get graded on that, to get evaluated as an employee would. you know Public education wasn't certainly created in hopes of igniting your inner explorer. So I definitely think that it worked. A lot of people don't have a love of learning because they endured the burden of memorization and regurgitation. You weren't learning, you were training your mind how to memorize things that you would be called to ask, to remember, and to have standardized testing, and to do well on the standardized testing, I mean. So it's like, how could you love that? Forced memorization, that sounds like a buzzkill. That doesn't sound fun at all. I'm not curious about being forced to memorize certain facts, certain statistics, certain places, certain historical events, which I say historical tongue in cheek because, not every historical event that I've read about or been taught about in school was accurate or complete. A lot of details are taken out. So when I think of that, I think of Texas, or in certain schools in Texas, I see that some of their history textbooks don't want to talk about slavery. They don't want to talk about Watergate because, God forbid we talk about Nixon or Reagan, and we're not worshiping at their altar. And so we don't want to talk about those things because we don't want to make certain groups of people or certain groups of affluent members or certain politicians or certain cities, we don't want to make them feel bad, right? And it's like, yeah, but history isn't about only talking about what you want. the subject of history isn't only about talking about the things that make you look good. It's about everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But when you get to like embrace the whole story, you get to see the opportunities where we can learn from our ancestors, where we can learn from past generations, and where we can maybe take their dreams and our dreams, combine them, and live something way better than the Jetsons. I love that little cartoon. There was like, they had the robot, they had, the dad was on like that little conveyor belt, and they would like shower him up and like blow dry him dry and like dress him up, and he's on his way. And I was like, that'd be great. And in the 1920s or 30s, they had predictions that by the year 2000, we'd have 3-day work weeks, and most of the jobs would be done by robots, and so everybody would be on vacation. I was like, I love that future. Why aren't we living that future, people? Like, so it's just, history isn't only about feeling bad about the things that don't reflect the most considerate mindset, but I'd rather read the whole story than just the pieces that I feel good about.
Exactly. Like you gain freedom of thought with access to information. Otherwise, people are controlling the narrative. There are certain interests that are protected systemically, And when we didn't have as much access to information, like if all of your news was coming from the television, right? Or the internet wasn't at your fingertips, right? It was like newspapers, TV, right? And it was a lot easier to control a narrative and control people in general about what they should believe about a certain situation. Like you saw that a lot in terms of like the wars that we've had as a country, like even the Vietnam War and stuff like that, like the propaganda and like the control of the narrative that implied that the US should get in there and get involved, and then it ended up being like a culture war. And that was the beginning, I think, of people like really questioning the government and being like, okay, maybe what they're saying isn't 100%, maybe they don't really have our best interest in mind. And it's funny that you see like protests like that happening at colleges and places where people have access to information and are a little bit open-minded. And that's where change happens. And even today, like, I guess it's not well, yeah, it is our responsibility individually, for this system, and not even in a controlling way, but like it is kind of our responsibility to pay attention to what's going on and to like try and have influence where we can, like bring us back towards ourselves. And if we see information that's being used in a like divisive way, we should be able to recognize that for what it is and not let it influence us, and you know encourage that attitude of like skepticism and curiosity, and like doing the work of like thinking through what's being said and really like considering if it makes sense and like whose interests are at the root of whatever is being said. That, I think, just little bit of skepticism makes you really difficult to control, and that's what the larger forces that be do not want from us. They do not want us to be skeptical, because that's not very great for capitalism, and that's not really great for this illusion of a democracy, right? So we're really getting into it now, fucking.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what sets you free from being pushed and pulled by all of these forces that want to control us, for their own benefit, for their profit, and don't really have our best interest at mind, right? Like they're like creating problems that then we need to solve by giving them money or living our lives in a certain way, or like they're creating these like overall expectations for how it should be, and then we sort of enforce that on each other as well.
Mhm.
So being the curious and skeptical person is what's best for like all of us collectively, because even the
Mhm.
people at the top of those corporations or like in those seats of government that are, we look at them as like being the bad guy, like being the big brother pulling the strings, like being like evil like people, but they're not, right? They're just people that are doing what they think is best too. And if you really get to the bottom of it, at the root of it is a desire for control, and underneath that, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of, not being good enough, that is at the root of like every single human being. And what we genuinely want is to feel free.
Mhm.
And even if people don't know it, like being free in yourself and being open about your thoughts, even if they're not the larger narrative, if they're not exactly PC, or like, yeah, like just being open and questioning things, and making different decisions that aren't what everyone else around you is doing. That's what's best for everybody involved. And people might not react to that in a positive way all the time, or like they might not recognize that what's happening for what it is. Like they can call you an asshole, but you're like, okay, well, I know deep down like that's what's best for you, is to be pissed off right now. So yeah, I don't know where I started that.
No, I love it. And you know what? Maybe I am an asshole. And that's okay too. Like I'm not one thing. I'm not always the nice guy, and I'm not always the asshole in the room, but I have the potential um to embrace a mindset that is not considerate, that is trying to convince everyone about something because, I identify with that idea, that concept, that theory, that story. And so when someone challenges the story or the idea, it feels like they're challenging me because I've identified so strongly with that stance, with that opinion. And it seems, like like alerts are going off in my mind, and that's how I used to feel when I was a lot younger, when I was constantly trying to shout over other people and constantly trying to be the smartest person in the room or the loudest or the one who got the final say or the one who knew the most, so I should be in charge and people should listen to me. And really that was just me identifying so strongly with a certain narrative, because I thought that that meant something about me. And I thought that if I wasn't intelligent, I wasn't valuable. If I wasn't skilled, I wasn't useful. I wasn't desired. I wasn't wanted. And so a lot of those intellectual insecurities were really about, a lot of deeper insecurities about my value and about, being good enough. And so it's so intertwined, and yet people don't don't always want to admit that the reason why they defend a side so hard is because they identify with that side and they think they are that side, and that changing means something about them, and taking in new information and making a new opinion means something about them, that they're inconsistent, they're a flop, they're not strong-willed, they're easily swayed, they're like a leaf in the wind, they go wherever the leaf wants. And it's like, does changing your mind really threaten your identity that much? Are you just gonna disappear into a puff of fucking smoke if you change sides? Like, like it's just it just seems like insanity sometimes when I think about that. And I do love that you brought up the anti-war movement against the Vietnam War. Um, I had looked it up while you were chatting, and it was the largest anti-war demonstration in the U.S. up to that date on April 17th. There was about 15,000 to 20,000 people who attended, but it's not the first time that there was an anti-war movement in the U.S. That was after the first war was declared. So, and that was the War of 1812. And that was one of the strongest anti-war movements in American history. The Federalist Party, which was one of the earliest political parties in the US, with the Democratic Republican, because they used to be combined and then they used to sound very differently than they do today. But they opposed the war with Great Britain, the War of 1812, on political and economic grounds. They viewed the war as a crusade, as a selfish attack launched by the Democratic Republican President James Madison that would disrupt the region's shipping and fishing industries. So people have been anti-war since we decided we were a country, and it's all about the money. You're messing with my business, Bill. What the fuck, man? I don't want to fight my business partner across the way. Do you not see this? You're really selfish. You're being really selfish going to war with Britain, man. And it's just, and I know that I'm making it sound a lot sillier than it is, but it just, sometimes our reasons to go to war and our reasons not to go to war sound really silly. Sometimes.
Yeah, you would think it's like, those are people over there. Maybe we could talk about it. Do we really have to kill each other? And that just comes from people not being able to let go of their beliefs or like allow another perspective to exist, right? Like people need their false certainty so bad. They need to believe that their perspective of the world is good and right so that they can feel valuable. And in order to feel valuable, like you have to perceive somebody else as being less valuable. And that's how these concepts create real conflict between people where otherwise, like, yeah, people don't get along sometimes, and that's fine, right? That's whatever. But like, you not agreeing with somebody should never ever be grounds to go over there and murder them. Like,
You
but
disagree with me, now you must die. Like, it seems so crazy that we can't talk about it. Like, I'm sorry, aren't we all earthlings? Why doesn't that matter? Aren't we all, like, I fight with members of my family. That doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, that's it, auntie's going down. We're gonna poison the mashed potatoes because like she disagreed with me about the recipe, so I'm gonna kill her. It's like when you put it on like a macro level, like a micro level, it seems ridiculous to kill somebody because you disagree on an opinion. And yet on a macro, larger global level, it makes total sense. Like, well, we don't know what they're doing with their nuclear weapons, and we could talk about it, but we don't trust them because we know that we would lie to them. So we shouldn't be trusted. And because we shouldn't be trusted, they also shouldn't be trusted. And it's like, you did a lot of mental gymnastics there, guys. Like, that was almost impressive. Like the fact that and then we think that we're so civilized. We think that we're the apex predator. We think that we are the hubris of humanity contradicts with the reality of humanity. We think that we are the best thing since sliced bread, and yet we don't even know how to have a conversation across country lines unless it's we signed a contract promising not to screw over the other. But we're the most civilized species on the planet. Bullshit. We still, in my mind, or from my perspective, in my opinion, we're still running on a little caveman software. There's still a little like, oh my goodness, it's a life or death scenario. And I feel like we're responding more from our primal savage perspectives than we do from this civilized and evolved and cultured perspective.
oh, definitely. Yeah, I think just in general, the human tendency to like create in groups and out groups in our mind, that's an evolutionary mechanism. And it was based in a society where we were competing to eat, right? Like it's always going to be my blood, like from as an animal, like our primary drive as an animal is to survive and reproduce and like push our own bloodline forward and like preserve ourselves. And yeah, that's at the root of every little and big conflict, right? Is just needing to perceive ourselves as more valuable or more fit and like feeling this sense of competition where really it's all one thing, like working together and Like we just don't perceive it as that because we're perceiving ourselves as separate parts. But really, we're not separate at all. Like that's just a conceptual division, and there can't be an in group and an out group without that conceptual division. Because, like you said, we're all just earthlings. Like if you just wipe your mind clean of any labels, there's not like the experience of being in the room with one person versus a person from like a different country, like their nationality doesn't matter. Like they're still a human being, and like yeah, they're unique in their own way, right? But that has nothing to do with their conceptual identity. And we just take that shit so seriously. And like I think maybe it's impossible to expect that, you know, tendency to create divisions and hierarchies in our mind. Like maybe it's, you know, it doesn't, because, you know, we experience it right now. So that's the context we're dealing with. But I think you don't have to take it seriously. That's the difference of knowing like, yeah, we're different, but that difference doesn't really mean anything. And it's like not one is better than the other. It's just two different things. And like two different things can exist without being in competition. But that's just not how our mind works. Like there has to be somebody who's right and everybody else is wrong. But it's like if the other people think they're right and you're wrong, then like, and then you just have to say like, oh well, they're stupid. Like they're intelligent, or like they're not as valuable as, you know, they're not as aware, they're not as civilized. They're exactly. And that's been the justification for genocide and war and countless like horrendous fucking things that when you look at it, you're like, how could a person do that to another person? But yeah, like our tendency to do fucked up things when we think it's the right thing to do for us is shocking as humans. And there's been a lot of psychological studies that have proven this. Like if you look at the Stanley Milgram experiments, I believe that's what it was, where they had, well, I won't describe the study, I guess, in specifics in terms of method and stuff, but basically somebody was applying shocks to somebody else, like based on like this learning game. That's what they were told it was about, but really it was they were being told by an authority to keep going. And then even so it becomes like this moral dilemma at a certain point where it gets to a voltage that's really high, and like the participant doesn't know if they're actually hurting somebody or not. And even when they are led to believe that they are hurting somebody, they'll continue on if they think they're doing the right thing. If an authority is telling them, "Oh no, like you must keep going." And they've used that study when analyzing like how the soldiers in Nazi Germany, you know, did the things that they did to the Jewish people, right? Like humans can be pushed to a level of like seeming inhumanity just by being led to believe that they're doing the right thing, that they're working towards the right cause. And yet it's like we have to keep believing that, because otherwise, like, we can't accept the things that we've done. We can't look at ourselves and forgive ourselves because then we're a bad person if we weren't fighting for a just cause. If like the things we, you know, like we have to believe we're in the right. And all of it's actually bullshit. And you know, like we can forgive ourselves for the cruel things that we've done out of a place of fear and insecurity and like clinging on to false certainty. We did that because we were scared, and all of us are guilty of that. All of us. No, there's not a single person who hasn't acted selfishly in their own interests, or like hurt somebody else and then didn't feel bad about it because they thought they were in the right? And or, created these conceptual divisions in your mind and, you know, comforted yourself with that false sense of superiority. We're all guilty of that. And I think when we can forgive ourselves and look at that within ourselves and extend that to others, that's when like we can actually begin to cooperate as parts of the same organism rather than these separate entities that are in conflict and competition. Like we could theoretically use our resources in such a different way, and it would be better for everybody involved, and our quality of life would dramatically improve if we were to just, you know, look each other in the eyes and like see each other as equals and cooperate. And if we can't, like at least be respectful and not fucking try and kill each other. Just, there's a lot of space. We can separate if we need to, but like it's it's when you see everything as being one thing unfolding, like all the conflict just is so incredibly unnecessary. There's just way more conflict than is necessary. Like a little bit is good to like, sometimes you have to, butt heads to come to an agreement.
Yeah, well, you
Or
can disagree without conflict.
exactly. Like you can
So,
disagree and use it to get smarter. Like we can learn from each other.
yeah.
But no, like it's just overall, and this applies to so many different areas in society right now. Like it's not just like political, or it's not just financial or nationality. Like it's even on like a social level, like differences between genders and races. Like the conceptual division really runs deep, and like when you see it for what it is, you can still like participate in division because like it is kind of cool to be this separate thing and like experience everything as if it's separate from you. It's a very unique experience, and it can just be a little more lighthearted. And I think I've mentioned this in a previous episode. It was like part of this book that I've been reading, but yeah, like I loved the example they used of like having a sense of humor about it, like playing your role. And even if you're in conflict with somebody, you can still have this sense of like chivalry, like when knights will like fight each other, there's still like a level of respect where like they'll bow, and like there's certain moves that are just off limits, there's like just a certain respect that's there, even though they're trying to kill each other, right? And maybe that's not the best example because maybe we probably shouldn't be killing each other, or like at least I don't think there's a desire to kill somebody else if you're seeing them as part of you.
It was,
But yeah, like I like that concept of chivalry, of just being like, even if somebody is disagreeing with you, even if there's difference, even if there's conflict, there's respect. And that's what we're missing. Like we see anybody who disagrees with us as just being wrong and less than.
yeah, it's easier to have respect or to show respect for something that you see value in. And so it's very easy for me to empathize with the people that may take a less than respectful perspective on people who appear to be in different groups from them, and those, and we make groups for everything and anything. So it can be all the things, all the examples that you listed. It can be financially based, gender based, race based, national based, socioeconomical status based. There are so many ways that we can group ourselves. And if you're in a certain group, it's very easy to be quote unquote very nasty towards another group when you don't see value in that group. And I can empathize with that, because when I was feeling incredibly insecure and incredibly isolated and separate from everything else, I wanted to be in a group that was high value. I wanted to be in a group that was good, quote unquote, that was worthy. And so I it wasn't hard for me to like put down other groups, to think that the group that I was a part of was superior to other groups. Um and we see, when we think about certain wars and genocide, right? The propaganda that the German government shared made Jewish people seem less than human. When our American government didn't have an issue with slavery, they had no problem reinforcing concepts that made Africans seem less than human. And if something is not human, then you don't need to treat it with the same respect that you would a human. When something is subhuman, it's easy for you to beat it harder, to starve it, to rape it, to sell it, to kill it, because you're not looking at a person. You're looking at something that is subhuman, sub-person. And it doesn't take much to want to treat, that quote unquote inferior group with nastiness and just venomous choices. It just doesn't seem like you're doing something to a person. It seems like you're like abusing an animal. And for the people that do abuse, like quote unquote, like official animals, because we don't always recognize ourselves as mammals, as animals, but when we think about cats and dogs and insects and cows and sheep and lambs, we think some people don't even see value in them. And so they have no hesitation to keep chickens in a cage for their whole life and never let them take a step. And only because there's the only value is the egg, and the only value in the chicken is after they've died, to sell the meat or to kill them before the meat gets too old. And their only value is when you've got cash in hand in exchange for that thing. And we talk about some of our history. We'll talk about certain slavery plantations in America that were picking cotton, but we don't talk about the slave plantations, which were breeding plantations that were breeding slaves and selling them. We don't talk about them because we don't want to focus on where we were exploiting humans and treating them like they were nothing more than cattle to be sold, bred and sold. But we don't want to talk about that because it doesn't make us look good. And it's like, yeah, but hiding doesn't make you look good either. So I don't know if you think that we don't notice, or if we don't know our own history. And it's important to be able to use the internet while it's not too censored. Because if you look at China, they censor a lot more of their internet than they do in the US. And so while we have access, it's important to be able to look up any question you may have, to share information, because unfortunately we have weaponized knowledge. And we don't even want to share our scientific discoveries. We don't even want to share the things that we're learning about because we don't want someone else to make more money or to someone to weaponize it and use it against us. And it's like, we are like so paranoid. It's crazy. And I love that you brought up the Milgram experiment, because I looked it up because I was like, damn, it sounds familiar. And it's that Yale study, it's the Yale study, where they were demonstrating that the power of authority and how someone in a position of authority can influence people to behave unethically and against their own values and wishes, right? And it's like, because you do listen to your authority figures in a certain way, at least the way that we were raised, and you almost are not raised to question them. You just take the orders, you don't question the orders. And when somebody above you, quote unquote, is telling you to electrocute another person, and you're like, this doesn't feel right, and they're like, but I'm your boss, and you listen to the boss more than you listen to your gut, that lets us know that our priorities are, maybe could be moved. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, our priorities are fucked up, because that's just an opinion. But where our priorities are is not set in stone, and we should be able to have a conversation about potentially moving those and what we are prioritizing individually and collectively, because we all live in the world that we co-create together. And so I used to be so pissed off, like, fuck this world and fuck society and fuck all this. And I was like, yeah, but I contributed to that world that I complained about. I contribute every time I spent money. I contribute every time I spent my attention, my time, the way that I prioritize certain resources, the way that I lived contributed to the world that I complained about. But instead of blaming myself and everybody else, it's just admitting that, you know, we made this world and we can remake it. So why don't we? We act like we're not the people who made the game that we're quote unquote stuck in, but we made it and we're stuck in it. But if we made it, couldn't we remake it? Couldn't we change it? Could it, like, it just seems so funny that in so many ways we talk about how powerful we are, and yet in so many ways we live like we're fucking helpless. And those two things don't match up to me.
Yeah, just deferring to authority is the beginning of the end. Because in the Milgram experiment, it literally was just the researcher in the lab coat telling them to keep going, right? And, you know, they don't know if he's a doctor. They don't know what his education is like. It's just somebody with an air of authority. And that does not guarantee that that person actually knows what they're fucking talking about. Nobody knows everything, right? So like you need to be like you need to recognize that. You can't look at anybody as like the answer to all of your questions. You can't look at anything as the one authority on what you should think about any particular topic. Like there's always more considerations to be had. And when you maintain that awareness of like the impossibility of certainty, right? Like you're a lot less easy to control. It's that, right? Like people have just, you know, not wanted to take responsibility, so they defer to an authority that tells them this is the way things are and everything's going to be okay as long as you keep doing this. As long as you keep going to work, you know, as long as you keep contributing to this giant fucking system and, you know, having your happy family because that's what everybody wants. But in reality, they just they want you to believe. I'm saying they as if it's anybody else, but just like the larger, you know, structure at hand. It's not about people wanting people to be happy. It's like wanting people to keep the system going. And yeah, I love the fact that you brought up, you know, if anybody is gonna make change, it has to be us. Yeah, they are our collective, the mysterious they at in question is our collective need, our collective fall or you know need for certainty, false certainty, comfort, just you know wanting to have an idea of what the fuck is going on and which way is up. And in reality, we'll never know, right? So it's just about being able to negotiate that for yourself and in every moment. And I think that would be something that would be extremely healing for, like, if I could just click my finger and have everybody in the world understand that nobody has the answer, I would. That would be great. But, you know, having this conversation is that being spread, right? Is that being embodied? And I don't have to, you know, be the one that's saving the world, right? And spreading this message because that's also, again, another way of putting myself up on a pedestal above other people and like convincing myself that I know something that they don't. And yeah, so like it's about maybe contributing and embodying this sense of freedom, this sense of curiosity and openness and living in a state of uncertainty. Like that's all you really have to do to be the change that you want to see. Like if you want the world to be more relaxed, relax and your world will be more relaxed. And the world at large for other people will be more relaxed, you know, because you're part of it and a integrated part of it. And you don't even know, like, just you changing can, you know, eventually, you know, maybe it has more of an impact than you would think. Like, even beyond just the people that you see on a daily basis, like, maybe even on like an energetic vibrational level, like you don't really know, but it is influencing the whole. And yeah, so you don't have to put any pressure on yourself to like go out there and save the world in the way that you think it needs to be saved. But I think just taking responsibility for your experience as a whole is all that you really have to do. Like that is change being made. And it's as simple as that. And it's a moment to moment choice of like, do I want to take responsibility for the way that I'm feeling or what I'm experiencing right now? Or do I want to make myself a victim and then, in doing so, make somebody else the villain?
Yeah, and making someone else the villain doesn't make you a superhero. Sorry to tell you. But we love our capes, man. We love our capes. And and I agree with you, Jackie. There is so much change that we can embody, and we can take responsibility for the fact that we are always contributing, right? So even when you think like, oh well, I'm not the owner of a multi-billion-dollar corporation that's polluting the oceans. Like, what am I doing? I'm not the worst example of selfishness. And it's like, no, yeah, that is a solid point, but you are always contributing to the world that you live in. You are always contributing to the experience that you live, because you are that experience. And it's important to take responsibility for what you give yourself, what you give others, what you do contribute to everyone else. Because, in my opinion, there's no such thing as not contributing. The example I always love to give is, we're all sitting for dinner at a big dinner table, and the loudest person at the table is contributing just as much as the person who hasn't said a word all night. So I don't care if you are the loudest person, the most active in terms of, appearances, or you're the person who is holed up in a cave on some mountain. You are contributing a lack of participation. That is your contribution. I'm sorry to say, there is no such thing as not participating. Even when you are quote unquote dead, the memories that people have of you still ripple out afterwards. I know people that have a closer relationship with a family member after that family member died, because they developed an appreciation for that person, for the lessons that person tried to share, for the example that that person lived, and that person is dead, and yet they are still contributing. So there is never a time when you're not contributing. Own it, own your contributions, own that responsibility, and stop only trying to take credit for the contributions that you think are positive or worthwhile or socially acceptable, or stop only trying to take credit for the things that you think make you look good, because it also makes you look desperate. It also makes you look needy. It also makes you look like you are scared. Like, only taking credit for the things that you think are great isn't your whole story, in the same way that we aren't only our mistakes, we aren't only our accomplishments, we are an unfolding learning process, a journey that has so many twists and turns, that give us countless opportunities to adapt and thrive, and be creative and curious and resilient. When I was growing up, the message I was getting about humanity was that, humanity has an indomitable spirit, that even when it feels like humanity is backed up in a corner, there is nothing we can't do, there is nothing we can't accomplish, there is no question we can't explore. And the message, the narrative that I'm hearing now is more so that, like, we are on the brink of extinction, or we are on the brink of a world war. And it's like, I'm not even that old. I'm 32. So, like, what the fuck happened in the last like 20 years, from when I was like 10 to now, that people feel that we were so capable, and now we are so like doomed? And it's just a matter of changing perspectives. And you don't have to solve global problems to make a meaningful contribution when you are living authentically as yourself. And no one even knows your name, and you're never in a history book, but you lived authentically. That, to me, is such a meaningful contribution. There are teachers in the public education system that I will remember forever, because they loved learning, they loved history, or they loved geometry, and that was their thing. They had to teach me everything because it was a middle school and elementary school. So you had one teacher that taught you everything, but like you could tell like they had like certain things that they like get they would just light up with, and they probably are not thought of by many people, and yet they impacted my life in ways that still ripple, right? So you don't need to be the most famous person or the most genius person to make meaningful contributions. Just being yourself, just relaxing, just being authentically curious and authentically enthusiastic is the most meaningful thing that you can do. And you don't need to get credit from someone else to live that way. Like it's I love the quote, like fighting for peace is like shouting for silence. And I feel like a lot of our culture is just like that. We're fighting for world peace, and we're shouting for silence. And that makes no sense. That seems like an insane plan. And yet out of tradition, out of honoring our cultures and honoring our history, we don't want to take a look at how fucking insane some of our current systems are, because we don't want to deal with the transition. We don't want to deal with the uncertainty. We don't like it just seems like there's a lot of resistance that's based in fear and based in an insecurity that we are not capable, and I just disagree. I think that we are all more capable than we really know, and we learn more and more about our capability and our adaptability when we forge through the fire, not when we run from it.
Yeah, I think that feeling of hopelessness is rooted in the lack of responsibility, and it sort of justifies and reinforces it. Because yeah, we can just be like, well, I can't change all of this. Like, what is little old me gonna do? And I can point the finger at these people. It's the billionaires, right? It's the billionaires who need to change the world. I can't change the world. So I'm just gonna keep living my life exactly the same way. And it allows you to shuck off that or pass the buck, right? But the buck stops with you. And there really is no difference between the influence that like a billionaire can have versus you. Like they might be able to, you know, change things in a monetary way, but they could never they can never connect with people in the same way maybe you can. Or we all have our unique essence that is just our contribution to the whole. And if we decide that we want to, you know, embody that essence in a little bit of a different way, in a little bit more holistic way, and integrated with the all of humanity with that perspective in mind, like not looking out just for our fucking selves, that that is so much more powerful than we could ever conceptualize, right? And I love when because it sometimes is frustrating to me that I can't know my impact. Like it's like I don't know how I'm perceived. I don't know the effect I have on other people. I don't know like what other people think about me or my value, and like sometimes I think about that and it doesn't matter, right? But like you can see that with everybody. Like anybody else, like you see them, at least I do, and I'm like, yeah, of course they would be confident because they're this and this, like they're doing these things. Like it's so much easier to see the value and contribution of other people, but it's like you can't look at yourself in a way that's, not biased. Like you literally cannot escape your subjectivity. You can't look at yourself. And so you don't see your own impact a lot of the time. Like you're like, oh, well, this is just my life, right? Like my decisions kind of only impact me. At least it can be easy to think about that when you're looking at things on a material perspective, right? And you're just thinking about your reality being just what's in front of you and not this like deeper, intricately connected thing that is beyond understanding right now. Um, yeah, it can be easy to settle on that. But when that shift is made just from seeing yourself as a thing in the world to seeing yourself as part of the world, like just that changes everything, and it changes your ripple. It changes the way you move. And it's a powerful fucking ripple. Like people want to be themselves. People want to feel free, People want to feel free. And like it's crazy that our the whole like point of the US was freedom, right? And liberty. And now it's just control and living up to expectations and like making enough to get by within this system that I have no power over. Like when did that like that shift just kind of snuck in? Like how did we become so fucking passive? Like how did we become like I uh
Convenience. We became so passive because of convenience. You know, why should I really pay attention to what my local and state legislators are doing, because they're supposed to have my best interests at heart? It's exactly what you said. It's passing the buck to someone else and pretending that someone else is going to have your best interests at heart, when the person that you gave that responsibility to has shown you time and time again that they're thinking about what's in their best interest. Like it's but we want the convenience, we don't want the work, we want the benefit, we want the credit, but we don't want the work, we don't want the responsibility because it's too hard. Oh, boo fucking who. Like your life is worth that responsibility. Like responsibility isn't a burden. You know, it can feel like that, right? Like I can empathize with that. Like I can empathize with not feeling it. Like I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's not fair. And even when you tell yourself it's not fair, even when you tell yourself it's hard, it doesn't disappear. You have to deal with the responsibility of your life, you know. And I get it, like, one, or not that I get it, but that I empathize when you also said I want to know what my impact is on others, right? And I felt that way myself because I wanted to measure my value. I wanted to measure the contribution that I made to someone else, because that let me know if how I where I stood with them. You know, did I prove myself good enough? Are they going to be in my life? Am I good enough to be in their life? Am I good enough for them to, am I worth their time? You know, and so I wanted to measure my impact because I wanted to measure the contribution that I offered. But the impact that you can see is the impact that you have on yourself. You know, the way that we talk to ourselves, you wouldn't let anybody talk to you like that, or you usually won't. You know, sometimes we're in toxic relationships, so you know, besides that, besides those examples, you know, if you met somebody that talked to you in the same way that you talk to yourself, you would never want to be their friend. And it's because you're not even a friend to yourself. So, you know, I constantly hear people saying, like, you know, oh, in post COVID, you know, I don't know how to connect with people, I don't know how to talk to people. I was like, you don't even know how to talk to yourself. You don't even know how to be your own friend. So it's a lot hard to make friends when you don't know how to be one. Learn how to be a friend. Do you check in? Do you, not that you like checking in, but like, do you pay attention? Do you make considerations? You know, and making a consideration isn't a loss, right? And when I think about COVID, I think that it definitely impacted people in many ways. But I think it's a cop out for a lot of people because it was only 2 years. Like, it was only 2 years, and that's if we agree that time exists, and time exists in a calendar template, right? So it wasn't that long, and the skills can be rebuilt. You know, you ever heard the saying when you were in school, if you don't use it, you lose it? Well, guess what? If you use it, you regain it. Like, it's like the opposite is just as true. So it just seems like people use a lot of things as a cop out. It's too hard. It's not fair. I don't know how to do it. I've never done it. Nobody's shown me. How do you think every first person who did something like started? You know, the first painter. We were in fucking caves breaking cranberries and berries together to make red and using our hands, and boom, artwork made. What was the fact that they were the first ones, that somebody didn't roll out the red carpet for them to learn how to draw on cave wall? Did that stop them? No. Was it incredibly hard to come up with a new way to create and express yourself? It wasn't that hard because we did it. Was it fair that they didn't have an art school to go to in the jungle? Like, the excuses that we come up with are just that. They're just us expressing an insecurity and an inability, or a perspective that we're incapable. And that's just bullshit, because for every person that says that they can't, there's somebody that says that they can. And so I've seen people who had kids in high school who were the first generation, came here, didn't know, their parents didn't know the language. They're translating between their parents and their school. They're like 8, and they're translating 2 languages, and they're helping their parents pay their rent. And like, besides the things feel hard, or that something may not feel fair, besides all of that, what are you doing? Like, you're so much more capable than we appear. Like, you've never done it before, and no one's not showing me, and I don't know where to start, and just do it. Just start and figure it out, because it's just the biggest barrier is me. And that's what I've learned. Like, as much as maybe my gender is sometimes a barrier in certain environments, maybe certain languages, I can't walk into a room in Japan and work the room in the same way that I could in America, because I don't know the language. So maybe my language is a barrier, maybe my gender is a barrier, but the barrier doesn't mean that's the end of the conversation. And that's where I like to encourage people and to call them out a little bit. That's like, and so what? You're not the first or the last person that struggles. You're not the first or the last person that's going to deal with uncertainty. And so how are you coping with uncertainty? Are you coping by telling yourself that you can't do anything? Or are you coping like, well, I don't know if I could do something, but I am curious. So I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. I don't know if I can or can't do it, but I'm curious enough to find out, you know. And so the way that you cope with uncertainty is on you. And so, I feel like you know, it's not always going to feel pleasant, but just because it doesn't feel pleasant doesn't mean that it's not worth an attempt.
Yeah, we're spending way too much time trying to feel pleasant. And that's why we have this fucking crisis on our hands. It's because balance needs to be had. We're doing the easy thing way too fucking much. And this is where it gets, So like intentionally choosing something that's uncomfortable and different and taking responsibility actually makes you feel better in the long run. Like the same way working out doesn't feel good, but it makes you stronger, you know? Taking responsibility and, sometimes eating your words, taking into considerations, accepting that you were wrong. Like all of that stuff isn't comfortable, it doesn't feel good, it's not satisfying to your ego, and yet it enriches your experience. That's change happening. That's growth. And like either you can avoid that growth and change and settle for, comfort and distraction. You can only do that for a certain amount of time. Like you were saying, you're always contributing. That responsibility is still yours, even if you deny it. Right. So like you're you theoretically could be driving your own life into the ground by just not participating and shying away, right? And like you can be like, oh, what was me? My life is so shitty. Why would I even try? And then that just gets you deeper and deeper into this pit. And I feel like that's what we're experiencing collectively is like, oh, well, you know, we've been disempowered. We've been taught to defer to authority. And now it's like, well, what can I really do about it? Like we're taught to be passive, we're taught to be victims, and we're taught to be easy to control. And that's why we have all of these issues that seem so fucking overwhelming. But the answer is not to lie down and accept defeat, right? Do not go gently into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And that's what we need to do, right? Like we need to take responsibility and fucking, even if it's uncomfortable and even if, in the end, we still have a nuclear war, right? At least we did something in our time that both changed our experience and improved our own experience by just relaxing and, accepting the reality of uncertainty, which is the big fucking cognitive dissonance we have in general as a society. Like we can't accept the fact that uncertainty is just the bottom line. Like we want to believe certainty exists so bad that we look fucking stupid. We make ourselves look really dumb because we're like not willing to recognize the things that are right in front of us because it might make us feel bad. Like, okay, but yeah, actually embodying that change and changing your own life and seeing the ripples, and not seeing the rest of them, but just knowing that they exist, right? Like just knowing that change is happening if you're changing. So basically, we need to stop being little pussy bitches and like fucking
Well,
accept that.
sensitive little
Yeah,
sacks, right? Sacks are
yeah.
more sensitive than pussies. Pussies take a beating and keep on trucking.
Yes, actually, thank you for correcting
You
me
know,
there. Like,
I love talking shit.
you know what I mean. Like we need to, and I think it just comes down to like our unwillingness to take responsibility is just because we need to think of ourselves as good. Like we need to think of ourselves as good and worthy. And black and whites don't fucking exist. Everything is a shade of gray. And so if you can't take in new considerations because right now you think you're a good person, and if that's challenged or questioned even slightly, you're going to lose your center. Like that limits you so much in terms of your growth and what you're capable of doing. Like, yeah, you're going to have, if you want to like have a genuine impact, and if you have like a big dream or you have like a big project you want to accomplish, like you have to be willing to try shit, even if, like you said, you don't have anybody telling you how to do it or what to do or what direction to go in. Like you have to sit in the driver's seat and make that decision. You have to be willing to accept the uncertainty and the failure and the self-judgment and the doubt that come with that. But what you find when you are able to accept that a little bit more is that it's really not the threat that we always perceive it is, right? And then it actually builds our sense of strength to go through shit like that and keep going, because then it's like, okay, well, there's all this evidence that I'm actually going to be fine, and my life is going to continue on. And so change really isn't so bad, and it doesn't mean that I was a piece of shit before I changed. Like I can just accept the new considerations without making it about me, and we're just making everything about ourselves and trying to understand what we are and if we're good enough. Like that's the bottom line. That's at the root of all of these conflicts and all of this tension collectively, is just this question and this desire to feel like we're good and we're worthy. And you are inherent, like you're not good, but you are inherently worthy, right? Like you are the universe in a drop. Like if you look at the universe or anything else in your perception, like you're a part of that. Like everything that you appreciate and all the things you don't, and all the things you don't even know about are within you. Like it's so much bigger than just, are you a good or a bad person? Like you are infinite potential, and you are intelligence manifest, and you're here, so you deserve to be here. And you don't have to prove that on a conceptual level. Like your experience comes down to your experience, and the more that we prioritize that and take responsibility for it, the more that we can see change happen, like on an individual level, but also on a collective level. And and it's crazy how much change can happen in such a short amount of time. And so we shouldn't be doubting our ability to like turn this thing around. I think we do have an indomitable spirit because we're still here fucking kicking. And Even though there are many people out there that, have become passive, there's a lot of people who haven't, right? And so overall, the tide can turn any day now. And it starts with just your ripple, right? Everybody has to take that responsibility on themselves, but if we all do, we're fucking powerful.
The tide has already turned, man. Like we are collectively having a conversation about where our priorities are and how we are navigating the current system and the current structures. And we are talking about that more. There are thousands of people in the DU community, and there are so many more people outside of the DU community that are thinking these questions, that are thinking about these considerations, that are just not so sure that the way that things are is the way that things should stay. And I definitely think this is a really good reason to consider the research workshop. And I say this because, like, no BS, being able to trust your ability to search for information and to use that information and using it to make another contribution in society, another contribution to your life experience, to the quality of your life, is crucial. But if you don't feel confident in your ability to make decisions, to look for information, to ponder questions, then you're trying to run a race with your legs tied, with your ankles tied. Like, there's no way that you're going to be able to run. And so being able to develop skills and develop really confidence and faith in yourself to adapt to any circumstance is such an important thing that I don't see enough, in my opinion. So, I definitely think this is a great place for us to wrap up, but I definitely did a shameless plug about the workshop because ultimately that workshop is going to give a lot more than we're getting. And we're going to have so much fun in it, and we love sharing information, but like, we're not selling this workshop for thousands of dollars. We're giving away so many resources. We are sharing our enthusiasm, our curiosity, and a genuine desire to share and to help people empower themselves. And so that's why, this shameless plug is more of a selfless plug, because I'm not going to certainly be able to quit my job from the profits if there are any. But it's not about profits, it's about the people, and reminding them that they are more capable than they imagine, and that there is nothing they can't adapt to. And so even if you're not sure exactly what you'll do, it's all going to work itself out. And so I like that the workshops and all the resources that DU offers are all just reminders about your own ability to handle anything that comes your way.
Well said, Amanda. Yeah. Please come to the workshop if that interests you at all. We would love to just chat with you and dig into some fun topics and, talk about our research experiences, share our little tips and tricks. And yeah, like you said, empower more people, more versions of ourselves to take agency over the information that they accept, the information that they, you know, base their decision making on. Because that's it's such a big difference, right? Like having agency and being able to make your own choices versus just listening listening to what other people are telling you. And it's very much in the spirit of what we're doing here at DU as a whole, right? Like learning to trust yourself and empower yourself and do the things that you've always told yourself you can't, because the only limits are the ones that you're creating for yourself. And you'll find that the more that you learn and research, like the less walls you perceive, right? The more possibilities are on the table, and um, the more vibrant your experience becomes. So I'm excited for the research episodes to come, for the workshop, and, just for more conversations with you, Amanda, because these are the highlight of my week. honestly, most of the time. And it's so fun just having this space, having this platform, and the ability to practice, you know, running my mouth, having faith in myself, to, you know, process and just be process. And it's so much easier now that I recognize that I can't measure how I'm doing. I'm not doing this for any reason other than I enjoy doing it. And yeah, so it's just incredible being able to have these conversations every week. And thank you all for joining us for this episode. We'll see you for a Do You Real episode this Friday and every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. And be the change in your own life and and for all of us, right? Just embody that relaxation, and you never know the impact that you can have.
No.
So yeah, thank you guys all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.